You know, you hope that you can get into a creative flow state. You know, it's almost like we're fighting against ourselves no matter what we do, trying to summon something else from beyond. I don't know if anyone's ever heard people speak about ideas, creativity, but it's so strange that you're able to conjure up images of things that never happened and create new realities from nothing. It could be something, I don't want to say as simple, it could be something like Lord of the Rings, right? Like, where do you pull that from, especially at that time? The godfather of fantasy. Everything stems from Tolkien, and he himself drew from folklore and mythology. And where did all that come from? And if you look at all the religions and the books and the movies and art, it comes from somewhere. What's going on inside of our minds? Some people believe it's innate, it could be intelligence. Some people are just more creative. Other people believe that they're pulling it from something. I don't know how much of that I believe, but that goes into like some law of attraction stuff, manifesting, ideas waiting to be found, your brain waiting to lock into things. Some of that's happening right now. These cigars burn for a while. We're just kind of in it, and as I closed out the last video, we just recently put one up, Iron Legacy, and I really enjoyed making that. It made me think, and I just love talking about armor. I miss talking to my dad about those things. I love reading about everything, weapons and munitions and armor and outfits, the origins of it all the way forward. And that's maybe why I'm so obsessed with my father's work. You know, you go back to the 80s when RoboCop's coming out, he gets the inspiration, starts making the Ursus Mark III, then we got the 4, the 5, 5B, 6, 7, and 8, and so on. And it's the same thing with Iron Man. It's the same thing with everything. As human beings, we're always obsessed with conflict and weapons and armor. It's a part of our culture as a species, if I'm being a little dramatic with it. But throughout human history, the one thing we've always had in common is war and the need to defend yourself regardless of what it's against. In 1998, 99, around there, my dad started working on a formula. He called it the Hertzie. And at that time, remember, this is before the internet, this is before phones. You had to go to a library or hope that you caught something on TV to get that type of information to study if you weren't already an academic. So he started working on Hertzie, which is essentially a precursor to Achilles. It was a polymer-based substance, but he was using spider silk, which is something that they're thinking about nowadays, because of course the tensile strength of it is just incredible. I don't have the numbers, but anyone that's ever touched a spider web knows that it is strong, but we can't replicate it with modern science. Maybe in a lab somewhere in America or China or something like that, where they're throwing trillions of dollars in the best minds, they've got something, but nothing on a large scale. So he was fiddling around with polymer and glue and spider silk and various things like that, and he stumbled upon the Hertzie. And this was something that you could, as with everything with him, it needed to be cost effective. It needed to be something that could be manufactured in mass for cheap. And it was a polymer solution that you could coat fabric in, something that it would absorb into, like a woman's makeup pad, which he demonstrated on Ripley's Believe It or Not when they were doing one of the suit test videos. So anyway, he starts coating these makeup pads in this polymer solution, the Hertzie, and they're coming out pretty strong. I'm not saying it's anything that science couldn't do or had not done, but at that time, for a man working out of his garage, it was pretty incredible. You know, you could coat a makeup pad and suddenly you could pick up a car with it. He had something there. And that was a formula that he worked on and off from, let's say, 97 to 2017, right before he died. And that's with the Vulcanite H. The goal was to use something like that for a suit. And then you fast forward to maybe 2004 when he's working with Limbic, the light infantry magnetic blast cushion, which was, think of like a big pad, a big square, a couple inches thick. You'd mass produce them for pennies, as he said. Throw them on Humvee doors, things like that, as a quick way to up armor vehicles. It's something they already do in the military with armor packages on tanks and stuff. The reactive armor that detonates, or I guess it pre-detonates if an explosive, or if, what are they, the armor-piercing composite, fin-stabilized discarding sabot rounds, it's something like that. And it takes that initial impact. I think the RPG-7 is something that it hits the armor, and then a rod or something like that is able to enter the inside of a vehicle after the initial explosion and burning away, or thermite, I'm not quite sure on the specifics. But anyway, this is something that's already existed. So he was doing that again. But at that time, when Canada had entered the Middle East with America, they didn't have anything like that, or at least they didn't have it in large numbers. So US soldiers and Canadian soldiers were getting killed by improvised explosive devices. My uncle was in the military at that time. He was my father's brother, of course, and he was quite worried. So what does he do? He goes, I'll make something for you. He was on Discovery Channel. And of course he had thought about using elements of Hertzie for that. So you can see from 97, 2004, for well over a decade, he's working with armor and armor systems and polymers to kind of make the perfect system, because nothing's really been able to beat Kevlar for body armor and vehicle armor. I think there's a few fabrics stronger than Kevlar. I believe it's Xylon or something like that. It's incredibly strong. But he was always trying to do it his way. There was an ego to it. So when he started working on the Trojan, not only was it going to be the greatest, innovation mankind had ever seen, it was also going to be able to stop 50 cals and this and that, and it was, it was right out of Halo. So he'd been working with body armor for a while, and he couldn't beat what was already out there. He'd come close, which again was impressive for a man working with scraps essentially in a garage. He could come up with essentially an over-the-counter solution that was quite cheap, comparable to, I believe, level 4 hard body armor. I'm sure everyone knows what that is now. The ceramic plates. Whether you're playing Call of Duty or watching videos on YouTube, you've seen hard body armor. But the problem with ceramic is when it's struck, it's so strong, it's so hard, it's brittle, it cracks, much like this ring that I'm wearing with tungsten. It's so hard, it won't bend, it'll just shatter like glass. He didn't want that. So as we fast forward through the years, Hertzie turned into Achilles. And he really found something with that formula. You could take... I need to say this first. I was always... My father was very charismatic. Very good at selling things. But he wasn't always truthful. He would over-exaggerate and overcompensate. So I was always very skeptical of what he said. Is he selling us a lot of bullshit? Is he a snake oil salesman? Is this a lie? I'd call him out on this. I didn't like criticism. So this is why whenever I speak about his innovations, I'm hesitant to endorse them. Because some maybe worked in theory, but overall it wouldn't have worked, or maybe something had already been done before and he wasn't aware of it. With this that I'm talking about, the Hertzie, the Achilles, although I have Googled certain things and I understand that it is not a new concept to work with polymer, no one in the world had ever done it like this, or let alone built it in their backyard. So we make the Achilles and just think of a caramel or resin, and you can coat it onto fabric, the woman's makeup pad. But what if you put it on Kevlar, right? He did this because he realized it was almost impossible, even if he had created something better than Kevlar, better than ceramic plating, to try and get it out to the world was almost impossible. So just use something that's already proven. We already know Kevlar works. We already know that X amount of sheets of Kevlar can stop a 9mm or a 45, maybe even a 5.56, things like that, right? So we would just take that. You coat it in the Achilles, and then you can make molds from it. And why I speak about this specifically, and why I will always return to this innovation, is because it worked. Firsthand, I witnessed it working. For one, it was corrosion resistant, which didn't make any sense. We were using glues and other things that you could just buy over the counter, among other ingredients. And we had an investor at that time who said, you need to put it into this specific acid. One day I'll get the name of it for you. It was an acid that we bought at a hardware store. And it came in, of course, the plastic jug, but it was also wrapped in plastic. Maybe someone knows what that is. Very corrosive, very bad stuff. Goes through anything, except for plastic, which we were not using. We were using Kevlar coated and, let's just say, glue. So we threw this Kevlar coated in glue into a container filled with acid. We let it sit for days. Days we let this thing sit. We pulled it out, and it looked warped, but it still held its strength. So somehow Achilles was acid resistant. Beyond that, we did send a sample of it to our investor in America, and he did go to a gun range, a little bit easier in America than here in Canada, and they shot at it, and he sent us a video of a 9mm being fired at this, and that's, nothing incredible. Everything will stop a 9mm. But we sent our Nishin foot. Think of some shin armor. We sent this piece, and they tested it on the gun range. And the bullets were literally bouncing off of it. What was incredible was that it wasn't even leaving a mark. The greaves, the Nishin foot, they weren't cracking, they weren't bending, they weren't warping. Whatever we had done to that Kevlar had strengthened it to a point it was essentially like steel now. If you get thick enough steel, of course, like hitting the gong or something, the bullet will just bounce off. So the bullets were bouncing right off of this. Now, I'm not sure what caliber they tested up to. I'm not saying it's stopping, rifle rounds and things like that. But it was stopping small arms fire. And that's not bad for a guy in his garage who didn't have any degrees, who didn't really know what he was doing. This brings me back to creativity and where do we get our ideas from? My father was part-time religious. And although he didn't believe in God in the biblical sense, he believed in some type of a creator. He just referred to this entity as God. He always believed he'd get his ideas from God. I don't know if that's true, but some part of me has to believe it, because I'm not sure how someone with no degrees and no real background in material science or anything like that can go to a hardware store and other places like it and somehow come up with a polymer that's able to deflect bullets. Not bullet resistant, bulletproof. It was immune to those 9mm rounds, completely immune. I still have the formula for that. One day I hope to recreate it, because I do believe that would change things. It would be incredible to really put something like that through its paces and see what it was capable of. Just some stuff that I've been thinking of. We always go back to the armor. We always go back to the Iron Legacy. Previously I was talking about the God theory, reincarnation, and now we're talking about where are you getting your ideas from? Where do they come from? how are people able to do what they do creatively? You know, just really makes you think. And when you talk about legacy, and what you leave behind, I think that's pretty incredible. One day I really do hope to show that to the world. I think it would be important for him, not just me, but he did a lot of things. You could poke a lot of holes in them, which is fair. And then lately I've been struggling with, was it all bullshit? Was he just a snake oil salesman? But you can see the Ursus Mark V, you can see the Mark VI, you can see what he was capable of. But then he starts innovating and he does fire paste, and we'll get into that at some point, but that was incredible. But with this Hertzie, with this Achilles, this was something else. I mean, I don't know where he was pulling it from, but it was magic. I mean, imagine being able to 3D print any suit you can think of, whatever you want. Cosplay's huge right now. Think of your favorite cosplay suit. You can make it bulletproof. But the biggest thing was, it wasn't that expensive, and it was light. And this wasn't heavy. Let's just take like the Iron Man Mark II suit. Everybody's seen that. Everybody's watched Iron Man. How heavy would that suit be if we made it out of Kevlar? Less than 100 pounds? And then you coat it with Achilles? This stuff was light because it didn't take much. And I'm feeling down about certain things. I go back to a couple innovations, and that's one of them. That Hertzie was something special. I don't know where he was getting those ideas from, but incredible stuff.